A warm welcome about our presentation about HR management in Europe. We are Group 1 and I'm Sandra and I'm going to talk about how we're going through this presentation. We start with a quick introduction. I will talk about the history, then we go through the European approaches, which are frameworks, and we divide by areas, and also we will compare the northern part and the Germanic part of Europe and give some practical examples, and then we give some, in the conclusion, we give some recommendation in future trends. So let's go on the brief history. Just overall, about 1900, the term HR appeared the first time. It was in the US. It was more an administrative approach. It was all about achievement and measurement by productivity based on Taylorism. And then between 1900 and the Second World War, there was quite a lot of development about more humanistic approaches. It was more about the people themselves and not only about their productivity. Then there was a cut in while the Second World War was going on. It was just about war-related industry, but it was all over the world more or less the same. But after the Second World War, it tended to be a high development of revolution, and it was about humanistic approach again as it was before, and it was more about worker satisfaction, and there were some anti-discrimination laws introduced just to protect workers and give them their rights. And then when we move on from the 80s, when all these kinds of laws were established, it was really important to get it like in a broader view, a strategic approach, more or less, so that it was included. It was not only along the supply chain, a supportive activity, HR, it was more integrated, it was based on strategy and long-term thinking. And when we go on to the present, it's all about globalization everywhere, so the trends at the moment are about learning, training, cross-cultural management, then we accept more diversity, and also the HR approaches have to consider that, and we will talk about that more in detail later on in our presentation. So I hand over the word to my colleague, Neha.
I'm going to talk about the universal paradigm, the first journal approach of Europe, and this perspective is basically based on the journal practices of HRM in Europe. And it's a linear relationship between the variables that are extended to the entire population. For example, journal practices and the mandatory rules and regulations of employment applicable to all the multinational companies of Europe. And use of this perspective has recently changed the practices to the related commitment and participation of the workforce, concession in problem solving, teamwork and participation. It's basically the higher hierarchy of the power distance based in a multinational company in Europe remains lie in the decision making, and the journal approach is basically the higher authorities is involved in the decision making of the company. Moreover, standardization not only underpins the organizational culture but also have the synergetic efforts. For example, the cost for the development of certain recruitment or training programs can be shared, and managers working across different nations can apply the same management systems with certain the managerial homogeneity. Talking about the universalistic approach, comprehensive human resource planning, ensuring the M&E has the appropriate people in right place at the round corner at the right time. It's how the company wants to place their employees based on the sectors and the divisions of the segmentation of the business. And moreover, the staffing policies that capitalized the worldwide expertise, that's the country specific and the host country specific. It's basically the one culture moving to the another culture in the universalistic approach. And moreover, talking further about it is the compensation policies that are strategically and culturally relevant. In this, the culture is respected, and at the culture point of view, every aspect of the HRM is being considered for hiring, processing, and working in the organizational culture. Moving ahead of the contextual paragraph, it is the most common in the European practices of IHRM. Is the contingency approach, which interactions between the HR practices and the contingency factors, which is the sector of activity, the company size, the ownership, and the organizational structure. How the organizational works from the upper hierarchy to the lower hierarchy, how their business plans are, how the industry works, and how the employees of the companies are from the different backgrounds of the world, talking about on the global scale. Moving ahead on another point, employees and the unions have a different perspective of the management team. Some may agree or some may disagree to the decision-making hierarchy of the organization. In this approach, it's not the upper hierarchy is responsible for all the decision-making, but all the stakeholders are involved in the decision-making. It's whether the opinionated or the it takes longer time to conclude the decision, the strategic planning decision, but it's more often invents the further innovation ideas and the convergence of the cultures. The broader set of stakeholders is involved for the formulation and implementation of human resource, and it's basically the referred by Discourse and Jackson as a multiple stakeholder framework in which each aspect, whether the customers, suppliers, investors, shareholders of the company are involved in the business unit and the supply chain sector. Taking a further alert to the contextual approach is the main our contribution of this approach lies in the reconsideration of the relationship between the employees and the unions and the HR system. Categories of the contextual variables can be described as a temporary, spatial, environmental, cultural, psychological, and philosophical. It can be anything. For example, the aesthetic sense, how they are dressed up. For example, the language, linguistics, what language the other employees talk among themselves from different backgrounds. Or maybe the facial expression, how they are. Or maybe the further discrimination can be faced or like described as based on sex, religion, language, etc. Environment can be like economic and political and social opinions of different backgrounds of the employees have it in the organizational structure and how they see as a market opportunity or business opportunity and how they want to work in an organization and what they demand and seek in the organizational framework in the context paragraph. Now I'll hand over to Ahmad for further investigation.
My name is Ahmad Jamil, and I would like to explain you about the minimal group paradigm. So the minimum group paradigm. It is a methodology in which the social psychology investigate the minimal group paradigm conditions occurs between the groups due to discrimination. In this methodology, it focuses on the discrimination rather. Discrimination is done between the groups or outside the group. Okay, the differentiation between groups consists of favoring in-group over the out-groups. That means that if there is a group working in a company and there are two employees from two nations, that one is from France and other is from Spain, there is discrimination between them or not? Are they getting the proper rights or not? The level, if we take it as two options. Option one, it would be like that if we take the Europe as a full one identity, or on the other option two, we will take the countries like Sweden, France, Germany as one smaller identity, and it will be easier to define as a small identity as one country. So I would like to describe you that minimal group allows to see European Union having one ID, but it also allows the other countries as one single identity, or rather than other countries of Europe. Now I would like to explain strategic paradigm. Strategic paradigm is a direct connection between the strategic HRM and economic success, which means that, for example, French employees and Spanish employees are working in a company, and they are more like resource based. So they would like to share their experience with each other. And strategic human resource management has increased the reliance on resource based on the firm. That means that the firms should be more resource based in strategic paradigm, and the changes in the companies. For example, there are certain changes in the company. One is the company goes. One strategy is the company goes global. One is the diversification of human resource, one is the downsizing of the company, and one is the decentralized of the company. I would like to explain decentralized of the company, that the power is headed towards not to the higher management. It is spread throughout the managerial levels of the company. Going global means that having a same standard throughout the nation, like throughout the nation means from if a store that operates in one country have the same kind of products, then it should be having the same kind of products in the other country. There are two kind of strategies. One is cost leadership strategy, and the other is the differentiation strategy. Cost leadership strategy is that low-cost strategy structure, and which focuses on the low cost of production through its hierarchy. And the other one is the differentiation strategy. Differentiation strategy focus on the different products, different innovative products, and differentiation strategy focusing on different experiences shared by different employees. The knowledge is shared by other companies as well. Now I would like to summarize my points. One, the strategic paradigm focuses on the standardization and standardization and differentiation strategies. Now. Now I would like to call Chandan.
Hello. My name is Chandan, and I will discuss about the European geographic regions, as you can see. So the European geographic region is the western peninsula of the giant supercontinent of Eurasia. And European nation, the continent, is with the larger number of states, that is 47 states. And as you can see, it is divided into four parts, that is northern, southern, eastern and western. And there is an influence of the EU legislation on all the geographic regions in the Europe. And the last point which you can see is the majority of the EU member states share similar policies and the procedures among all the regions in Europe. And moving forward to human resource management across the Europe. So as you can see, the difference between, there are like two factors which affect most of the European regions. Mainly, the first one is the nation factors and the company-based factors. So now, what are the nation-based factors, national factors? So it's mostly inspired from the Hafsten. That is the power distance, cultures, mental models, societal structures, and the languages. And the company-based factors are within the companies or within the industry. As you can see, that like the HRM models and practices It differs between sectors, organizations, and locations, and also between the managers dealing with their subordinates or the other employees within the company. And moving on to familiar region cultural clusters, that means that there are regional factors, as I explained before, the national factors. These are the main national factors. Like there are different religions in the European regions which also affect and also split the Europe in different HR attributes. And now moving forward to the unification and transferability of HR practices, which is limited by the cultural and the institutional factors in each of the European country. And now there are different HR practices and different frameworks within Europe and the different nation states among themselves. And now the managers operate with the National Institute content and share a set of cultural organization. That means the different managers in the different European areas, they operate differently and they follow their HR practices for themselves. Now moving forward we'll explain each of the northern, western, southern by different slides. So the first slide is HRM in Northern Europe. Now management in Northern Europe that considers remaining country as social partners to contribute positive patterns in the human resource management. And now organization in the Northern Europe is influenced by the social political environment, liberal social political environment. And the strategy which is made within the northern areas, the companies in the northern areas, is with communicating with all the level of employees in the organizations. And sometimes there is a weak effect when a company is hiring someone or a new employee in the company. It does not affect the strategy planning for the company. And there is a lower level of power distance and higher level of uncertainty avoidance among the employees and the managers in the Northern Europe. And now moving forward to the Southern Europe, will be explained by my other group member.
Hello, I'll be explaining what HRM in Southern Europe is like. Southern Europe, Eastern Europe and the Western Europe. So coming to Southern Europe differs from the Northern Europe in terms of power distance and uncertainty avoidance. Basically, there's high level of power distance in Southern Europe and lower levels of uncertainty avoidance. Higher level of power distance means that the distance between the managers and the lower level employees, which means the blue collar employees, is quite high, and they don't interact with each other directly. And uncertainty avoidance is high in Southern Europe, which means that they're more risk taking, they're more prone to taking risk when it comes to business. And high power distance and low power distance avoidance lead to basically lack of communication between levels of hierarchy. For example, high power distance leads to less communication between the employees of the lower level, which is the blue collar level employees, and the managers. So there is no direct conversation or link between these two. And even though this is not supposed to be considered as the right way of dealing with HRM in many of the countries of the world and even in Europe, but employees in Southern Europe are more comfortable with this kind of what do you call high power distance. They're comfortable with the distance between them and the managers. And strategies in companies in the Southern Europe are not basically made with the consent of the blue collar employees, which is when managers of the higher level make strategies, they don't really consider the ideas or view of the lower level employees. This is about it. Coming to the next slide, which is HRM in Eastern Europe. The culture in Eastern Europe shows strong preferences to universalism instead of individualism. They prefer to work more in groups and rather than working individually. And local employees basically tend to wait. They're more prone to waiting for the managers to get back to them if they have certain queries or information or any communication. And local employees are encouraged by means of like they are encouraged to participate in two-way communication by means of incentives. Basically, they're given incentives to communicate properly with to have a proper communication between the high-level employees and the lower-level employees. And there's high importance given to friendship within colleagues and customers. Basically, people of all levels, managers and the subordinates, all share a bond of friendship rather than just a formal relationship. And HR managers work hard to be planned and to avoid corruption in the countries of Eastern Europe. HRM in Western or Germanic Europe. Germany basically consists most of the Western Europe. So individualism, they prefer individualism rather than collectivism. They again prefer to work separately, not in groups. They like to work on their own. They like to have their own aims and objectives when they work. And employees wish to see transparency in their work, in the control structure and rules of the organization. They don't really like the rules and regulations to be hidden by them. They want more transparency when it comes to rules and regulations, and they like to have more clear responsibility rather than joint responsibility, as they prefer individualism rather than collectivism. They prefer to work on their own. They prefer to gain their own knowledge, to apply their own knowledge, and to gain individual rewards rather than group rewards. So yeah, and this kind of understanding leads the organization to a better understanding of hardworking and intelligent employees, basically. And there's always two-way communication and interaction between the levels of between the hierarchy, and yeah, that's a good thing to consider, because most of the countries prefer this over a high power distance. Summary will be, who's concluding? It's you? Alright, so summary will be concluded by me. Individual countries in Europe are basically remain clearly distinctive in HRM. They're quite particular about their different HRMs, like human resource management in different countries are quite different. You can't really compare East, West, North and South all together to have a common conclusion. But there are different companies with different distinctions, like some companies agree with individualism, some don't, and so on. Now, centrality of HR management. Centrality of HR management, which means the HR management is central, more central. It affects the adoption of strategic HR. So, centrality means basically external recruitment, internal recruitment, training, performance management, etc. And there's efficient information sharing and binary communication flow. That means the communication flow is quite in an organized manner, and the information sharing is done with all levels of the hierarchy. Even the blue-collar employees know everything about the rules and regulations. And we basically think that the transparency level should be high, and that leads to better understanding between the blue-collar employees and the managers, which means even the blue-collar employees know what the exact rules and regulations are, how they need to react, and how they need to perform when it comes to work. And we reach a conclusion that if there is identical HRM practices across the European continent, it will be more compatible, and it will be easier for the entire Europe to cope up, in a good way with each other. That's all about it. The next would be Hafsten's cultural dimension, which will be continued by Randi. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Randi. This slide shows a country comparison between Sweden and Germany. Hofstede's cultural dimensions show the different values and drivers of a culture relative to other cultures. We are going to explain to you today two different dimensions. Which is the masculinity-femininity dimension and the uncertainty avoidance dimension. We're going to explain them because they have very different scores, and that's very interesting to look into for us. Okay, so a high score on masculinity indicates that the society is driven by competition and achievement, while a low score indicates femininity, which means dominant values of caring for others and quality of life. So for the uncertainty avoidance, it means how important it is for the country to avoid unknown situations and unfamiliar relations. Moving on to Sweden, one of our comparison countries. Here we have a score of 5 on masculinity, which means it's a feminine society. For the Swedes, it's important to keep a work-life balance, and it's also important for the managers to strive for consensus and equality, solidarity, and quality. For the next dimension is the uncertainty avoidance, where Sweden also scores quite low, and they prefer no more rules than necessary, as well as they have a relaxed time schedule, and punctuality does not come naturally. Furthermore, Sandra will tell us a bit more about Germany.
So it's me again. I don't want to explain the same. I just want to mention the same points according to Germany. So when it comes to masculinity, Germany tend to be very masculine with a score of 65, which is quite high compared to Sweden with 5. So we tend to be more about achievements, more individual. We are more talking about I than we. We are not that social as Sweden people are, and we tend to live in order to work. And the manager's role is really important. There's a hierarchy, and as I said, it is more about achievements and individual achievements and not the group ones. And the second point is uncertainty avoidance. The score is as well very high here. It means that we have a high preference to avoid uncertainty. So we need a structure, we need a plan for everything. And we also create scenarios to predict the future because we just don't like to have something unscheduled. So we are a bit inflexible, but this is what we distinct from Sweden people. And also the main important thing is that we have a strict legal system, which is different to other countries, and it is a completely different approach than we have in Sweden. So now we move on to a couple of more examples in terms of comparison, and I hand the word over to Randi again.
Yeah, so here we have part 2 of Sweden. We're going to talk about the legal framework, which is they have a basic labor law and they also follow EU laws. If you want to quit your job or if you get fired, you have a 3-month notice with pay, as well as no minimum wage, although the wages in Sweden tend to be quite high. And so the degree of formality, they have a flat and non-bureaucratic organization structure, and it's usual to use first name in business settings, even if you're talking to the manager, because they want to prove that everyone is equal. For the next one is the recruitment process. It's usual that you submit a cover letter with a CV, Then you go to 1 or 2 interviews before you get the job proposal. And education level is also quite high due to free education, and therefore the competition is high as well for the jobs. And for compensation and benefits, we have, or Sweden has, an unlimited sick leave, and also free healthcare. And final point is the guaranteed minimum pension. Yeah. Then Sandra will continue.
Okay, I move on with the same dimensions we compared. Just quickly, let's come back to the legal framework, which is impacting HR everywhere. And it means that, for example, only the labor law, written law, contains about 1,000 pages that we see that we have a lot to apply. So it's completely the opposite as we have in Sweden. And we have also considerable long notice periods, but the thing is, this is also written by law. So it depends how long you've been employed in the company, and therefore you have a specific time of notice. And we have a minimum wage, it's about £6.80 at the moment. So this is the minimum wage. It has to be paid of everyone. And then we have the degree of formality, and this is really useful to know. It's completely the opposite as well. So we tend to use titles, we tend to use surnames in business context, and it's really important for people to name their titles to show respect, also to show different hierarchies, and in the business context it's still very common, even if it's more converging because of US impact. So then we have the recruitment process. This is one of the points which is quite similar. Sometimes instead of the cover letter there's like a task demand that you have to fill a case study or something. But all the other things tend to be the same structure. So you have to provide your personal information, then you've got a telephone interview, whatever, and it's finished by a job offer, hopefully. And the last one, compensation and benefits. This is also very special. Based on our law system, we have some social insurances we have to pay for. And for example, for the health insurance, it's not for free, like Randi said. We have to pay 14.6% from our overall wage for health insurance. So now we go on with a short conclusion.
Yes, I will take us through a short summary. You can see the comparison of Sweden and Germany, whereas the masculinity is quite low in Sweden and high in Germany. Uncertainty avoidance is still low in Sweden and high in Germany. As well as the legal framework is medium strict in Sweden and very strict in Germany. And the degree of formality is also low in Sweden and high in Germany. While the recruitment process, both countries have high requirements. And finally, compensation and benefits are high in both countries. Moving on to the conclusion.
Yeah. Now we'll talk about concluding all the presentation in the end for the HRM in Europe. As you can see, the individual countries in Europe remain clearly distinctive in the field of human resource management. And the second point, which we concluded after analyzing whole theories according to the whole geographic areas, what we concluded is the contextual perspective is preferable out of the 4 HR perspectives, like the 4 approaches which we discussed before. So out of that, the contextual paradigm is the best for the HR practices in Europe because it is centralized in the EU. And the EU law has an umbrella, that is a law. And Northern and Germanic countries follows social partner trend. What does that mean is that they all work together. All the Northern and Germanic countries, they believe in working together in the HR they follow the same HR practices. And now the HR practices are converging due to globalization. What does the word converging means here? That the HR practices are getting blurred off because of some major factors like globalization, technology, training, compliance, changing family structure and urbanization. So everyone has to work as a whole instead of working just one unique HRM field. So that's the main conclusion after what we analyzed from the whole presentation. So thank you.